So hi everybody, Dave S here, otherwise known as Super Dave. I'm going to make a start on trying to make a video on how we did it, why we did it, to set up and install our Starlink system. First step we need to try and figure out is we know which circuits are controlled by the inverter. They're the GFI on the island, the TV in the main living room, those outlets are all run from the inverter. The TV outlets in the bedroom are run from the inverter, and also the two outlets either side of the bed. So the first step we're going to try and do is actually figure out where everything is, where the wires are, how they're all connected together. I'd like to run a separate circuit so that we can run independently of all the other outlets. The location for the Starlink router, we could locate it by the TV, run it off those outlets. The downside to that is we still need to get the Starlink cable to the outside world. I'm reluctant to run it slide side, so my thinking at the moment is we're going to run the router out of the cabinets over the hutch area. I'm going to try and run an outlet up into the top part of that cabinet. It'll be out of the way, it's up high, and then I can run the Starlink cable down through the chase in the wall. I'm looking to then run it out to the front, modify the cable so that I can then just plug in the Starlink receiver, see what I can do as far as putting all the different steps together. So this is the cabinet up above the hutch here. This is the one we're planning on using to install the router, and we're going to put it in up on the top shelf right in here. We're going to run the power cord to an outlet which I'm going to install up through the chase here. This check it out with Rich. He's done a few. He's shown people how to pull the cables up through here. First thing we're going to do is tack the breaker box. Here you can see I've already taken the cover off the breaker box. There's just the 4 screws around the 4 corners and the one in the center. So our next step is we're just going to pull the box out completely. Just a couple of screws on the side here. I should note that it's always advisable to do this without any power on. There are lots of live wires in here, so just to be on the safe side, I just pull the box and you can actually has enough cable here that you can pull the thing out all the way, and you can see it's quite a rat's nest in here. So anyway, what we can see is actually down in the corner here. What we can see here is that, and I will confess I did take a look at this earlier, there's a junction box down in the bottom here, and it's actually this junction box where all the circuit from the inverter are connected together. If there's no sub panel on this system at all, it's just all the wires are just stuffed in here. So there's 5 wires going into this junction box. The main power coming in from the inverter, and then individual lines going out to each of the outlets in the bedrooms and living room and the GFI on the island. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lift this box out. It was originally screwed to the floor. There were 2 screws just holding the box in onto the floor. I did take those out earlier so that I could see what was going on. So we'll lift the box out. There is just about enough wire to be able to get this out to the front where we can actually work on it. So this is it. And then 2 screws on the cover that we can just slide the cover off, and voila, there it is. That's your distribution box. So I have marked the cables. There's the one over here. I've got the black tape on here. This is actually the mains power coming in. This comes back from the inverter. This cable over here, which comes off the top breaker from the main breaker panel, is the power going the shore power going out to the inverter. This cable tells the inverter whether to switch between shore power or battery power. If there's no power on this line, it'll switch over to battery power. And then that power then comes back from the inverter onto this line. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 circuits going to each of the outsets of out. So I think it's maybe a little easier to see now. Got all the neutral lines under the one wire nut, live, and then all the grounds. So the next step will be to probably just disconnect, unwire them all, so that I can then add in an extra wire. I'm going to use a 14-2. These are all 20 amp cables. That's not really necessary for what I'm looking to do, so I'm going to add in the 14-2 cable and run it up through the wall. So I'll just move along with that, and we'll catch up in a second. So I've gone ahead, I've removed the cover over the chase. So we're going to bring our cables up through the bottom here. I'll probably put another hole in the back there actually, so I can bring the power cord up through the back. And then we're going to come up through the panel up in here, and I'm going to put in an outlet. It's a nice piece of material, solid enough that I can just mount the outlet directly into that box, and then we'll be able to mount our Starlink router up in the top box. As you can see, I've also gone ahead and removed my main control panel here, and it's a right rat's nest back in here. But over in the corner there, you can just about see it maybe, is the chase. So I'm going to run my snake down through there and pull it out at the bottom, and then pull the cable back up from the bottom. That's the plan, so we'll see how that goes. So I've gone ahead and I pulled the wire down through the chase, and we're going to put it into the box. I've gone ahead, I've stripped it back a little bit, and I've got the 3 wires in here, and I'm just going to wire nut them back in with the existing connections, and that should then give us the power that we need to go up to the outlet. So there we go, we've got everything wired up now. All the wires are up inside, twisted together, and wire capped off. I'm just going to run a bit of tape around them to provide a little extra insulation, and then this end of the project is complete. So that's the box back in, attached to the floor. There's just 2 screws that screw the box down to the floor. So that's it. Box is installed, screwed down to the floor, covers back on. Took the time to label up the box so that we can, so we don't forget in the future. Also went ahead and put in a zip tie at the back just to hold all the wires up out of the way. There's a lot of wires back in here, so keeping these out of the way. The only step left now is to put the box back in, and that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to keep the inverter turned off during this process so that there's no power coming back through, since I've not wired up the outlet yet. So I've gone ahead and drilled out a 3/4 inch hole in the back corner of the cabinet. Been able to then feed up the power line that we just pulled through, and that's going to sit up in the top here. And the next step will be to install the outlet. So the next step is to cut the hole for the box. We're going to come maybe a couple of inches out from the wall, and the box itself is 1 3/4 wide. So come out 2 inches. And 1 3/4, and overall it is 3 3/8 long. So we'll just start here. So that's the box, that's the hole we need. The next step will be just to drill a couple of holes in the corners, and then we can use the old trusty jigsaw to cut the hole out. So we've got the hole cut out. It looks pretty good. Just check that the box fits. It's always a good thing to do before you start wiring everything up. Looks pretty good. Right, we're actually using RV Designer S8111. This is a pretty good outlet. Used them before. They come in white, brown, and black. And the nice thing about them is that they're easy to wire, and they essentially come with their own box. So we'll go ahead, we'll wire it up, and then this part of it will be ready. So to wire these up, it's actually pretty straightforward. Just strip the wire back. There's a couple of slots. Just push the wire down in. Obviously always easier said than done. So you just go ahead, you push the wires down in, you can see them down into the slots there, put the the ground strap in the middle, and that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward. Takes a little bit of pushing to get them down to go down in there, but it's not too bad. And then once you're done with that, you can put the back on, and it's all ready to go. So the back is it just clips on in its place. So we're just going to slide that over on both sides. So the back just clips back in place. Pretty straightforward to use. And then we just drop the box back in its hole, and we're all set. Finally, put the cover over it, and that's it. So the final test, just to make sure it's live, I've turned on the breaker to the inverter, and we'll just plug in a little nightlight, check, and we're good. So all set.
Many minutes later.
Starlink system comes with a 50-foot cable, and we purchased the optional 75-foot cable, and this 75-foot cable that we're going to use to do the remote access, remote coupling. So there are two different connectors on the ends of the cable. This one here is the one that goes up into the antenna, and this is the one that would normally go into the base of the router. So we're going to remove this connector, and we're going to install on it a waterproof Ethernet connector made by Nutric. It's the NE8 MX6-B. I'll put a link down below. This connector, when coupled with this through-hole coupler, will provide a watertight seal for the incoming cable and the cable that goes back out to the router off the back of it. Planning on installing this piece in the front, in the battery bay in the front there, and then snake the cable all the way through into the up to the router. So that's the first step. So ideally, we don't want to cut this cable off, this plug off, too close to the end. Worst comes to the worst, we can always remake this cable. So I'm going to cut it off at maybe, I don't know, about 3 feet into the 3-4 feet in. Still going to leave me with over 70 feet outside to position the antenna should I need to. So that'll be my first step. I'm just going to use a straight pair of snips to slice the cable off. There we go. And then from here, I'm going to use a cable stripper that's set up for coax cable. We're just going to put it in, and I won't do this side. Not that side. That's not the bit we want to work on. Need to work on the cut end. Here we go. So move that out of the way. So the instructions for the coupler say to strip the cable back a couple of inches. So that's what we're going to do. And I'll pull that back off. And these are the twisted pairs that are inside the cable. And I'll just slice this piece off. We don't need that. And this is the drain wire on the cable, so we'll be using that later on in the cable. So the next step is going to be to actually untwist all of these pairs. So we'll do that using pretty simple, just use my needle nose pliers. Keeps it clean and simple. So a key step, which obviously we all forget it from time to time, and I should have done before I stripped the cable back, is to get the cover of the plug on. So we're going to just slide that on now. Okay, slide that down out of the way, and then there's the cable clamp that goes in with it. So slide that in. Definitely would have been easier to have done this before I stripped these wires out. That's for sure. There we go. And we don't need those till quite a bit later, so we'll slide them down out of the way. Okay, so I've got all the pairs of wires. There's 8 wires here, all untwisted. Just trying to get them straightened out a little bit now so we can work with them. These twists are still too big, so we need to So the next step, this is the carrier piece for the connector. So the next step is they come pre-assembled in this part, and luckily they're labeled up, and depending on which wiring code you're working with, it tells you which color pairs need to go where. So in our case we're using the B configuration, so that's the orange, white, orange, and on the top also is the brown and brown, white. So we just feed these wires through, and then we feed in the brown and brown, white. Flip it over, and then on the back here we have the blue, white, and blue pair. We can get them out. So we have orange, white, orange, brown, brown, white, white and blue, blue, green, green and white. So all our connectors and all our wires are now in the right place. So our next job is to crimp down on the wires, on the connector. Now we're going to use my trusty wire pliers here. And on that side. That appears to be all the way in. So then the next step is that we need to trim off all of these excess wires. Need to try and get these in as tight as we can. So we've snipped off all the wires now. Looks pretty clean. So the next step is to actually try and align this collar. And this collar fits in only one way. We take our drain wire and we just wrap that around. This is what provides the grounding. Notice theory says we just screw it together. And that should be this end of the cable made up. So I went ahead, I've removed the 50-foot cable from the antenna. This is the end that plugs into the antenna base. So this is the end that's going to be removed this time. So again, we're going to give ourselves a few feet in case we need to do something in the future. And we'll just chop the cable off. Having done that, now we're gonna, I'll just put this down below, out of the way. So first step here is going to be to strip the cable back, as we did with the previous cable. I'll just do a couple of inches here. And then we can remove the plastic coating. That's the drain wire. Again, we won't be using that at this end. I'll leave it there for now. Next step is again to unpair these wires. So I'll go ahead and get that done. Okay, so I've gone ahead. I've straightened out the wires. Pretty reasonable. We're going to be putting them into this RJ45 connector here. So we need to trim them back to about a ½ inch or a little around there. So we're going to put them in the cutters. Get a nice clean edge to these. It's critical that they're cut clean and straight. So then we just slide in. Make sure we got our colors right. Orange, white, orange, green, white, blue, blue, white, green, brown, white, brown. So they just slide in like that. It says in the manual. Crimper goes all the way in. You squeeze down. Push out. And there we have it. Looks okay from here, so we will find out very soon. So I've gone ahead and hooked the cables back up. So this is the one we just worked on, put the RJ45 connector on it. And we're doing a dry run just to make sure that everything works okay before I go ahead and start snaking the cables around. So this is the completed connector. This is on this side. You see the RJ45 that we put in. This is the Nutric connector, and this is the connector that we attached to the 75-foot cable. So we've gone ahead, plugged them in, turned the unit on, and it works. It's a miracle. No, it's so I've got it set up on my on the back of my truck right now, so you can just see the system is set up there, and went through its normal routine, moved the antenna around, calibrated itself, and aligned. So all set. So our next step will be to take this apart, and then we're going to snake the cable, the data cable, down through the wall, through the chase back up in here, which we used originally to put the power in. So I'm going to go ahead, get that set up, hook it all back up, and make sure it still works. So I went ahead, I drilled a hole in the back corner, snaked the cable down through it, and I put a single staple in on the cable just to stop it from sliding down and finishing up in the cabinet below. And then I took the cable on down. There's several holes already in the system here, in the box here, so I've just ran it through there, and then finally went through and snaked it down into the chase that runs over at the back. This is the cable right here. So I'm going to go ahead now. Everything's snaked through. Everything looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this box back up, and then we're going to move down into the basement area and run that cable through the firewall to the front, and put the connector in. Okay, so the final few steps. Ran the wire through from the basement, and just used it to followed along the water lines for the washing machine up through the bedroom, and then just snuck it across the top of the wall. Drilled a 3/4 inch hole through the firewall. Still need to put a little bit of foam back in there when I get some next week or so, just to block that off. And then we went around, we connected, ran the cable through along the wall and through the firewall again here, and installed the the connector, I'm sorry, on the front panel here. So this is the overall setup. So you can see the battery box there, and then the cable just plugs in right here. So now when I want to set up the Starlink, all I have to do is take the antenna out of the storage area and plug it in right here, and it's good to go. I don't have to worry about running any cables anywhere. So much more convenient, and pleased to say it's still all working after running those cables through. So that's it. That's the conclusion of the project. Very pleased. Wasn't too difficult. So we'll if you have any questions, just reach out. I'll see what I can do to help you out. And in the meantime, good camping.